we must recognize this. The church is a family, not an orphanage. The church is a family, it's not an orphanage. You see, the reality about, an orphanage is that an orphanage is usually characterized a couple of things, is that usually you have one or two overworked staff trying to serve a bunch of underserved kids. And we spend all of our time and all of our responsibility trying to depend upon those individuals to take care of all the work and to do all the things. There's really no burden of responsibility for the orphans to maintain. But a family, it's all in. There's this responsibility that each and every one of us have. I'm married and we have 6 kids, and my goal is that one day I get to sit back and relax and my kids are doing all the work. Because if you can walk, you can contribute. And that's the reality of what we're saying, is that the church is not an orphanage, it's a family. If we look at the one text that I want to point us to is 1 Timothy chapter 3. And as I was looking at this text and looking at the reality of what God is saying as he's talking about elders, people who are to take leadership and to incarnate it, what does he say? He doesn't say go create, this orphanage, go create these things. He doesn't create 501c. He doesn't say all these things, that he must be a good businessman, a good entrepreneur. But what he says is that he must be a good manager of his home. Why? He says, because if he can't manage his own household, how can he care for the household of God? And what's interesting about that is you got to look at those verbs and look at the switch. You see, Paul wanted to make sure, because he uses the word manage, is if he can't manage his family, then he shifts over and he says, he doesn't use the same word, he can't manage the church. You see, because I think God and Paul wanted to make sure right now that we got it, that the church is not an orphanage. It's not an organization that we are to organize and create. But the church is a family. He says he must be able to care for the church. That word care is only used 3 other times in the New Testament in that way. And do you know that word care is in Luke chapter 10 when Luke is using it from the concept of the Good Samaritan. When the Samaritan cared for him, wrapped up in his bandages. You see, there's an intimacy that we must have that we can't avoid. See, my problem is not that the fear that we're not going to have leadership development in our churches, because we are, but it's the environments we're training them for. What type of leaders are we training? We spend most of our time training people to lead systems and not lead people, to oversee structures and things. I really believe when we talk about incarnational leadership, we must have the same affection, the same compassion that we have for our kids when we talk about the people in our church. There's not this dichotomy, this distinction. It's like the church is not like a family. The church is the family. And until we get that, we're going to miss it. And so my compassion and my prayer for all of us today is that we would not treat the church like an orphanage, but we would treat it like a family. And we would incarnate ourselves with the love of God and the love of one another, amongst one another. And we will make the statement true that when Jesus says that, when he says that the world will know you are my disciples because of your love for one another. Because of your love. My prayer is that each and every one of us would resonate, allow that to sink into their heart. The apologetic of our day is authenticity. And until we become an authentic family, we're not going to really be able to incarnate the gospel. The gospel is real. The church is a family, not an orphanage. God bless.